So, welcome everyone to another episode of our Changemakers podcast. I'm Kimberly Rice, your host here at Changemakers as the Chief Changemaker, and I could not be more excited to welcome my guest today, Jacqueline Wales, to speak about how high achieving women can reach their dreams, create the career of their dreams by charting their own course. So, welcome this morning, Jacqueline.
Pleasure to be here, Kimberly. Thank you for inviting me.
Certainly. So what we want to do, we just want to jump in right away. And I would love for you to share with our listeners, Jacqueline, a bit about yourself, a few insights into your professional journey, and what makes your heart sing professionally.
Well, that's a great question. So I'll start by saying that I'm the author of 3 books, including The Fearless Factor and The Fearless Factor at Work. I've been absolutely fascinated by fear for many decades, and I decided to work with mostly high-achieving women to help them understand how to move the fear in their lives. I've been doing this for over 18 years, and I'm frequently asked why I do this work or what was it that brought me to this work. And a lot of it was based on my own experiences of going through my own stuff and figuring it out and knowing a lot about human behavior, being an astute observer since a very young age, simply because I had to. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family with a lot of the traditional violence and alcoholism and all the other stuff that goes along with living with dysfunctional people. And so how does that impact your life? Well, it does. It really impacts your life with self-esteem, lack of confidence, inability to forge a proper career path, certainly in my instance, and not really knowing what it was I was capable of or what it is I wanted to do. And so it was quite a journey. But along the way, I as I said, I wrote 3 books. I made music. I'm a professionally trained singer. I took up martial arts in my 40s and earned a black belt in karate. And I started my own business when I was in my 50s after having raised 4 kids. So there's a lot of history back there, and it has all informed a lot of what I know about how women struggle in the world to show up, take ownership and authority of their roles, and really be the best that they can be, which is truly where my passion lies. And I said many years ago, my mission in life was to change the world one person at a time. And that's what I've been doing, just helping along.
That's phenomenal. So a black belt, what was that like along the way?
A lot of thousands of hours of training. I was in martial arts for about 12 years. So that gives you an idea. I started in Taekwondo. I earned a red belt, which is the one below black belt. And then I switched over to karate because I'm also a global nomad. I've lived all over the world. I started out in Scotland, then I went to London, then from London to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Paris, Amsterdam, Bali, New York, and finally back to California again. And these are just the places I've lived. I've also traveled extensively throughout the world over the years.
Wow. So what led you to live in all these places?
Adventure, for the most part, simply the curiosity. I wasn't driven there by career. I never wanted a career in the corporate world because I knew that it was a bad fit right from the get-go. I tried it, didn't like rules, so I like to set my own rules. And that was pretty clear. And I was fortunate. I didn't have to. And so, I've been married to my partner now for 43 years, and we have his, mine, and ours family. So we have 2 kids, and then I have one, and he's got one, and so it goes. So there's been a lot of, as I said, a lot of history, a lot of experiences, a lot of ways in which I've had the opportunity to interact with a tremendous diversity of peoples and experiences over the decades.
Wow. Oh, so you are a fount of knowledge and wisdom and life experience globally, culturally, intergenerationally. So I'm just curious, what speaks to your heart in the context of the path that you pursued of helping high achieving, I'll just say, women to take greater ownership and authority over their lives?
So it's not just for high achieving women, it's for women in general.
Sure.
What I've heard over the years and seen over the years and was witness to over the years, including with my own journey, is that we women settle for less. We don't step up. We don't take the full responsibility for everything, frankly. And we rely too much on getting other people's permission or validation. We basically observe the rules. I grew up in a generation, I'm a baby boomer, I'm now in my 70s. So when you think about, the changes, the cultural changes for women over the years, have we made that much progress? No, we haven't. We step forward and then we step back. And, hearing the other day there about, there's a law in Florida that girls can't talk about menstruation until they're in 6th grade. What kind of shaming is that still in this 21st century? It's extraordinary. So, I look at the struggles and the challenges of women in general, and I started with the women in my own family. I wrote a book called When the Crow Sings, and it looks at 3 generations of women giving birth to children outside of marriage and how it spills over from generation to generation until one woman gives a child up for adoption. I told the story of my grandmother, my mother, and myself. And that generational trauma that has occurred had to be ended. And so I've really been passionate about thinking about how women themselves, and specifically in my own journey, how to step beyond the boundaries of the fear and uncertainty, the insecurity, the caretaking that takes place for women too, because people, I hear all the time, women, and I'm dealing it now with my clients, need to take care of other people before I can take care of myself. I say the hell with that. We have to learn how to take care of ourselves in order for us to truly rise and shine to the potential that we are all capable of being and becoming. But it's not easy. And that's the part that I like to say. I'm not saying this is a cakewalk, not by any measure. This is a piece where we have to take charge of our transformational processes. And if we are not doing that, if we're not committed and invested to really challenging ourselves to take a hard look at where the limitations are, what the self-beliefs are, how we can actually move the needle on that insecurity that exists for everyone. They talk about the imposter syndrome. I say that's a label. Let's get rid of the labels. Labels are limiting. They put you in a box. I like to say the imposter syndrome is very simple. It's an emotional response to insecurity. It is self-doubt. That's it. Self-doubt. I doubt my capabilities. I doubt my capacity. I doubt my ability to step up and truly be my authentic self. It takes work. You've got to be willing to do the work.
So I completely agree with you, and that's just fascinating that's been your observation, that's your life's work, and a lot of that aligns with what we do here at the Changemakers program, is illuminating for our women members, what is holding them back, what they say that they want. It's one thing to say, but what are they willing to do to attain that better way of being, whatever part of their lives that they are looking to. And I'm just curious, you've been all over the world, you've experienced women globally in the different cultures, and the work that needs to be done. What is it that you see in their resistance to change?
Well, I think the resistance to change is pretty dynamic, no matter whether it's male or female. The resistance to change is that there's something I have to give up in order to make that change. Now, it might just be your negative thinking that you got to give up. They saying of better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. My response to that is, do you like living in hell? Because the truth of the matter is, when people talk about staying in the safe zone, staying in the comfort zone, if you really examine it, it's a discomfort zone. And as we change, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's the only way that we push through the obstacles. I talk about fear matters to your success. And normally you don't put fear and success in the same sentence, because you're dealing with 2 different parts of the brain. When we look at fear, it's a primitive brain in action here. It's that fight or flight reaction. And of course, when we think about success, it's the prefrontal cortex, the decision making, the executive function of our brain. Well, when that fear kicks in, guess what happens? You get confusion and muddled thinking at the front of your head. So it makes it very hard. But if you're willing to challenge yourself to take a hard look at that, and again, I keep coming back to this point, because too many people resist change until they're forced with their backs against the wall to do something different. They'd rather go along to get along than to actually go along to succeed. So fear matters to your success because it's a driver for growth. When that fear shows up, it's your opportunity here to go, take a moment, think about it. What's that about? Because I guarantee you, most fears are imagination-based. They have absolutely nothing to do with reality and everything to do with the stories that you tell yourself. It's the narration of your life. And do you want to change the narration of your life? You want to be the author of your own story as opposed to being in someone else's epic novel? Then this is the work that we all individually must do.
So can you describe a little bit about the work that you do with your clients, and what from the outset to the if there is an ending point, what are some of the greatest products or results and learnings that you wished for your clients, with all things being equal as far as success?
So I'll give you an example. I have a program much like yours. It's called Transformational Strategies for Success. It's 11 strategies, and we take a very deep dive and deep immersive look at the ways in which we get in our own way. The fundamental questions to my program are, who are you? Which is a question a lot of people don't know how to answer without putting a label on it. So who are you? Where do you want to go? What is it that's getting in the way? And really, fundamentally, what is it that truly matters to you? So taking them on this journey, because it is a journey through these transformational strategies, allows people to really get to a place of not only deep self-reflection, but also holding up a mirror to yourself to answer questions that you may not think about asking. People say, I'm looking for answers. I say, no, you're looking for great questions. So we have over 300 questions in this program, as well as many different layers of self-reflection. And what I found was that when people go through this program diligently and they're willing to step up for themselves, it changes lives. And I'll give you an example of that. One woman wrote to me and she said, I just want you to know how much you've changed my life. And I read this on a Saturday morning and was like, oh, that's interesting. And she said, I have discovered that I have a generalized anxiety disorder. And when I would not have recognized that if I had not done your program, because it forced me to think about, why do I have trouble going to the supermarket? Why do I have trouble starting my own business or looking for a new job? What are these issues? And through that exploration, I discovered that this was what was working for me or not working for me. And so I found a way through to change that. Another woman said, I found it hard to step up and speak up in a meeting. And what I did after I did the communication section of your program was to walk into the room and let them know I was there. And even when they tried to exclude me, I now bring myself into the room. So the confidence rises, the ability to ask for what you want rises, and the ability to stand stronger in yourself rises, simply because you really are beginning to understand what is it that makes you tick.
So powerful, and it is transformational. So, I mean, I've done a good amount of study on the brain and how it functions and how it's different between men and women, and would you please share with our readers, as far as taking your clients through this program, kind of what happens with the brain and what kind of changes can you expect to see over what type period of time? I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, but, with investing yourself.
Right. So if you think about it, what we're doing is we're rewiring the brain. The brain, we think about the brain in terms of the conscious brain, but the majority of our brain is working on an unconscious level, where I call it the default method. We're in it before we even know we're in it. And so catching yourself is part of what the program asks you to do. It's like observe, be attentive, to what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and start to reframe that. So we reframe by taking a negative thought and transforming that into, or reframing it into, a positive thought. But that's a practice, and that practice has to be done over and over and over again. It's like when I was doing martial arts. You know, I didn't suddenly learn how to do proper blocks and punches and katas and all the other things that go into, you know, proper martial arts training, thousands of hours. And what I discovered more than anything was that there were 6 things that we all must have in our lives to be successful. Number 1 is commitment. And this, again, I had to, you know, from martial arts, you got to be committed to be in the fight. The second piece is you got to be focused. You got to be focused on the person in front of you, and you're not looking at their arms and their legs to see where they're going. You're looking in their eyes, because when you look at somebody's eyes, you can see everything else. It's very simple. Then you need discipline, and you need thousands of hours of discipline, of doing the same things over and over again until it becomes instinctive. And then you got to have follow through. So when you have done what you're doing, you got to be able to follow through. So somebody throws a punch, you got to be able to follow it up. You got to have consistency too. And consistency is frequently missing, because you're doing the same thing again and again and again. It can get kind of boring, but nevertheless, it is part of that resetting of the DNA in the response patterns that we have. And ultimately, it's perseverance. You fall down, you get up, because one of the biggest fears in many people, especially successful people, fear of failure. And I like to say that we're all failing our way to success, and failure is about only one thing. It's a choice, a decision, or an expectation that did not go the way that you had planned. That's all failure is. There's nothing more to it. So I teach them in the program how to address these things by resetting the neural pathways of how we are actually approaching our lives and our thoughts, our emotions, and how we can restructure ourselves to be stronger. And at the end of 5 months, and it is only a 5-month program, people are starting to feel that they have control over their life. Because they're being much more observant and attentive to their own needs. And that, I think, is really the critical piece of it.
When I always say we cannot give from an empty cup. And as women, we have or allow so many demands upon us that we end up being so depleted that there's nothing left to give. I think that that's just one of the misnomers of our culture here in America, and maybe around the world. You've seen it, that it's not selfish to engage in self-care and self-discovery. In fact, it's probably the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves, and then by extension to others.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And when people say to me, you know, my self-care is selfish, then I have to really restate that one. And one of the things I say, for instance, people who are very approval driven, and that's for a lot of women, we need validation, we want to make other people happy. Too quick to say yes, need to say no more often. And you have to ask yourself a fundamental question: does this serve my highest and best needs? And if the answer is no, or maybe, then the answer is you're not going to give an answer right there. Because the knee-jerk thing, it's like the magnet in the sky, you know, need a volunteer, a hand goes up. And then you think about it afterwards because you've committed yourself too far and you're not taking care of yourself. How many women are burned out, stressed out, and exhausted because they're too busy trying to manage a high-level job and a family and keeping everything moving and running? And what about me? Did I take time for exercise? Am I eating correctly? Am I getting enough sleep? You know, those types of priorities. So resetting your priorities for you becomes another important piece. And, you know, the big piece, of course, is that, you know, if I really stand up and be myself in the room, maybe they won't like me. Well, so what? You're not there to please everybody. Right. They have to deal with it.
One of the things that we say to our clients is no is a complete sentence.
Absolutely.
No is a complete sentence. And it really is like giving yourself a hug of affirmation that you do not need to be everything to everyone to be worthy, because we are perfect in our imperfection right now, right? Nothing needs to be added to that. And
Right.
somehow, some way, through our early childhood experiences, our culture always, driving us to change, even as young girls, that, if you have this makeup or this pair of shoes or this, it's all these external materialistic messages through the various mass media that really, what we found, there's studies on it, it changes the way our brain works and how we view ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And we fed too much on the media, and since, that our whole body culture. I mean, I was delighted when I think it was Dove came out with, we've got different kinds of bodies, and this is how we take care of different kind of bodies and different colors and so forth. And, there's starting to be a lot more awareness of that. But I certainly grew up with, the whole female stereotype that I definitely fell into for quite a while. Now, of course, at this point in my life, I could care less,
It's very liberating to navigate to a place where you no longer need anyone's approval, and actually what other people think about us is none of our business.
That's exactly right. And I tell that to my clients all the time when they're worried about what other people are thinking. I said, what other people are thinking is none of your business. You can't possibly get inside somebody's head. And again, you're just making up a story. And does that story serve you? Probably not, so change it.
So this is so fascinating, Jacqueline, because we speak the same language. From your unique point of view, what are some of the best practices that women, high achieving professionals otherwise, should focus on to develop a winning game plan?
I think the number one thing for me is trust yourself. Because fear is our inability to trust that we can handle whatever it is that comes our way. That's fundamental to fear. We don't trust. So trust yourself. But how do you trust yourself? Well, you have to actually take a look at what you have succeeded at so far. What has it taken you to get to where you are? I interviewed over 80 women for a new book in the last year and a half. And the first question I asked them is, where has fear limited your opportunity? Now, that's a big question. And I want to ask your listeners to consider that question. And the next question is, what is the greatest contributor to your success? So think of those two questions alone, and you'll come up with some really interesting answers. Where has fear limited your opportunity? And what is the greatest contributor to your success? And I'll tell you right now that when you address the fear of speaking up, of not allowing others to make decisions for you, to taking up room in taking up the air in the room with your presence, the greatest contributor to your success has been your ability to keep moving forward, regardless of the obstacles that were put in your way.
And what do you, those are excellent points, because we often are our own worst enemies. And when we can come to a point of self-recognition and self-awareness, then we can make different decisions to move ourselves forward. Something that we see with our clients way too often is the feelings of not enoughness.
Yes.
How do you address that with your clients?
So the feeling of not being good enough is fundamental to fear right there. And why do women constantly feel like they need to prove themselves? Why do we have to work harder? Why do we have to constantly worry about, if we're making the right kind of impression? Now, we've got a lot of stereotypes in the world and a lot of gender bias in the world that we're still struggling with. We know the numbers are we're not at parity. And according to the latest research, we'll never be at parity with regards to gender identification. So the point being for me, what I see is that piece of not being good enough. Is it really true? Because here's the thing about fear. If you can ask that question, is it true? Do you have empirical evidence for it? The answer is probably no, you don't. So again, you just made up a story about not being good enough. So the insecurity is really what we're addressing here. Now, how do we address insecurity frequently? We try to control everything. Now, as a recovering controller, I know this one really well. I'll do it my way. Get out of the way. I'll make it happen. We take on more than we should take on. We take on more than is healthy for us. So setting up these clear boundaries is another big piece of the work that must be done, of saying, no, that doesn't work for me. And that takes a lot of courage, because the opposite of fear is courage, the courage to take the next step. That's what I talk about in my work. So that, I think, is a big one for the not good enough, because we're all good enough. We're all good enough. It's like, I'm a mother to 4 children, and mothers grow up with this Madonna complex. We're supposed to be the perfect mothers, and we're supposed to be nurturing and loving and so forth. And sometimes you just want to slam your kid up against the wall and say, enough already. I've had it. I'm done. We've all had our moments with that. If you're going to be honest as a woman and you've had children, you definitely want to kill the little suckers at some point, But at the same time, we have to acknowledge we're imperfect beings, and there's nothing to fix around that, because that's the other side of it. We need to be fixed. The only thing that gets fixed is your dog when you want to do away with being in heat. That's it, But the point being is that you've got to really look at that "I'm not good enough" statement. Who started it? Right. It started with a message that happened either in your childhood or through teachers or through some bosses that made you feel smaller than you are, that made you feel that it wasn't okay for you to rise and shine.
What a gift you are to the world, to your clients, and your wisdom and knowledge that you are pouring out into the world, making it a better place, one life at a time. I'm so impressed and just delighted and tickled that you're here with us today chatting about that. And so I have a quick fun question that's aside from the amazing work that you're doing is, traveling the path that you have, that has taken you all over the world, and having children, having a blended family, developing all types of interests. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Don't believe everything you think.
Tell us more.
Well, if I had a deeper understanding of some of the limiting beliefs that I carried with me for a long time, my life would be very different. I made a lot of mistakes, drugs, alcohol, unwanted children. I had the whole gamut up until my late 20s and into my 30s. So it wasn't until I was in my mid 30s that I decided, when child number three came along, that I needed to clean up the history in order for them to have, for the child and the children subsequently, to have a better life than the one I had, and not repeat those generational patterns that I had talked about earlier in our conversation. Wow. So yeah, don't believe everything you think.
Very powerful, quite a prescription for a positive and learning. To me, there is no failure. To me, failure is like just life pushing you or nudging you into a different direction, particularly if we take the lessons that are offered through what we may characterize as failure or mistakes.
Yeah, and again, I think failure is just a nice label. It's all encompassing. And I'm going to repeat again what I said earlier. It's a choice and expectation of decision that didn't go the way you wanted it to. And there's only one word to apply: next. That's it.
I love it. I love it. And, as women, we are too prone to ruminate, right? The mind loop going over and over and over, and just not letting go and keep moving forward already.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Don't believe everything you think.
That's it's like the example of putting your hand on a hot stove. How long does it need to stay there to get the message something needs to change?
Yeah, in microseconds. And that's the thing about change. I like to say it's taken me decades to get the wisdom and the insights that I have at this point in time. And really happy I can share that with others, that makes a difference. But I want to help women do this in months, not in years.
Yeah.
Because we can, if we're willing to be committed, like I said earlier, make the commitment, focus on it, be disciplined, follow through, consistent, and persevere. These are the elements. And if we can follow all of those, and even in the places where I admit my weakness is consistency, I like variety in my life, and I'm very much, the bright, shiny objects, although I'm getting better as I get older, keep the focus and
Right.
keep it where it needs to be and make
Narrow it.
So,
We have to, because we take on too much, we have to have a more narrow point of focus that helps us stay focused. Because when we have too many things on our plate, feel pulled too many ways, and we're not speaking up for ourselves, then there's diminishing returns on how consistent we can be, because we're pulled to click
well,
our
I think we can, as women, get pulled in different directions. You've got your family who's pulling on you, you've got your job that's pulling on you, and then you've got your own personal needs that are pulling on you. But too many times we're looking for answers, and so we chase these bright, shiny objects in the hope that, well, maybe that's the one that I'm looking for that'll be able to relieve me of my problems. Maybe that's the one that will help me be more successful in my career. And so, I know myself, I've done hundreds of programs. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years on my own growth and development. But the point being is that it really doesn't take a dozen shiny objects to get you to the one place you want to go. If you stay focused and disciplined, follow through, consistent, and persevere, you get what you want. But be willing to be honest with yourself. Be willing to show up for you, because nobody else will. No matter how many times you reach out, nobody else can show up for you the way you can show up for yourself. If you have the courage to face the fear, deal with the insecurity and not good enough, and absolutely transform your life into something better.
Oh my goodness. Let's just put a stamp on that, because that's ready to go. I love it. Absolutely. So powerful. So, Jacqueline, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, so packed with wisdom and knowledge from your amazing journey. And so I want to ask if there's anything else that you would like to share with our listeners, anything new and exciting you have coming up that you'd like to share.
Well, thank you. I have a new program that I just started, and it's a 4-week program, so it makes it nice and easy and quick. And it's called Breaking Through the Noise, Redefining Your Relationship to Uncertainty. And what we do in 4 weeks is that we take a hard look at anxiety, stress, exhaustion, the ways in which we struggle with that insecurity that's going on. We look at fear and how you can identify what's real, what's not real in your life around your fears. We look at ways in which you can manage this emotional journey that you're on. And then we ask finally, what are you willing to change? And we look at resilience and how that comes about. And I support it with 2 sessions a week. One is a live session for teaching, and then once a week for Q&A. And it's a small group forum, because I believe that small group forums are what bring people together successfully for change, not large numbers. So I don't take more than 10 people at a time. And we're going to launch the second one on April 20th. And if anyone's interested, go to my website at JacquelineWales.com, and you'll find the program Breaking Through the Noise.
Wonderful. Breaking through the noise. And we live in such a noisy world these days. Oh, my Lord.
Yes.
So in addition to your website, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
You can send me an email to Jacqueline at JacquelineWales.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I post regularly on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that I put out once a week, most of the time. And I'm regularly posting on LinkedIn. So you can go check me out there. That's the only social media that I really do. I don't have any patience for Facebook, frankly. But there we are. So LinkedIn and my website are the 2 main places. And my email is Jacqueline at JacquelineWales.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining us today on our Changemakers podcast, where we help create bold lives and careers for women's services providers. And so this wraps up another episode of our Changemakers podcast. And what we love to say, because we know that we are all perfect in our imperfection, we have DNA and a change in our DNA. So go out today and be the change that you want to see in the world. Until next time, Sally O.